4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City. A fusion of politics, commentary, entertainment, and sports. Steve and his team bring you the latest news and opinion now. Here is Steve Malzberg.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, all day we've been telling you about the insurgency taking place in Iraq. It's happening quickly, and city after city is falling. They're closing in on Baghdad, the ISIS terrorist group, an offshoot of Al-Qaeda. Earlier today, John Boehner saying that the president has been napping while this has been happening. The president at the White House, in turn, saying that all options are on the table, in effect. Actually, what he did say was he's ruling nothing out, although I would have to imagine that he has ruled out boots on the ground. He also reportedly, according to the Iraqis, had turned down requests from the Prime Minister of Iraq to provide air strikes against some of these terrorists while they were assembling. So I don't know what will happen, but time will tell, and we will see where it leads us. Then you have Sergeant Bergdahl, and he is a sergeant, and I will call him sergeant. Of course, I do believe he was promoted in absentia after perhaps deserting from his troops, his fellow troops in Afghanistan. Anyway, he is now being flown from Germany, the medical facility in Germany, to the United States. So he will be back on terra firma here in the United States, possibly by tonight. And then it's going to get very interesting as far as what his condition is, as far as what the procedures will be next, legally under military justice code, and otherwise, because eventually there are going to be hearings, and eventually this man may be called to testify. Also going to be interesting to see if he returns home to his family, because we had reports, don't forget, that he didn't want to talk to his family at all during his time at the hospital in Germany. So we will see where that leads us as well. Now, talking about Afghanistan, the Afghans are tightening security as the Taliban is threatening to upset the vote, the presidential vote in that country. So you got turmoil breaking out all over the place when it comes to the foreign policy of this country. And it seems another day, another controversy, another conflict. It all happened so quickly. Earlier in the previous hour, Mary and I just got off the phone speaking to Ed Rollins, and and Ed said, I said, well, is this going to hurt? Is what's going on in Iraq going to hurt Obama and the Democrats? And he said, yeah, but it's just another in a long line of circumstances that are going to hurt Obama. Now, Obama's approval ratings in the polls out today at all-time low. And in fact, if you talk about the number of people who approve of Barack Obama and approve of George W. Bush, and the number of people who disapprove of Obama and disapprove of President George W. Bush today, they are just about exactly the same. I think there's a 1 percentage point difference in the approval side of it. So it's a dead heat. It's a dead heat. Now, when George Bush left office and Barack Obama took office, the disparity was huge in favoring Obama on both approval and disapproval, if you will. Now they've pulled even. So what does this say? What does this say? Then you've got Hillary. Hillary on a book tour, getting into it with a host from NPR. Well, I say getting into it, seeming annoyed, saying you're playing with my words on gay marriage. Now, I haven't seen the interview yet, but supposedly what's been reported is that the host accused Hillary of changing her position, being hypocritical on the issue of same-sex marriage, and Hillary claiming that her words were being played with. Now, is there a friendlier venue? Is there a friendlier venue than NPR? So, I don't know if a little bit of the polish, as Ed Rollins suggested, has worn off of Hillary's ability to be a candidate, to be, presidential, if you will, because she's blundering. She's blundering along the way on this book tour. And she's had to take back a lot of things, walk them back, and now I don't know how she's going to handle this down the road. But by the way, it turns out that I think within 1 year of leaving, what was the story? That was yesterday's story, the $12 million that the Clintons got, but also that now they're the wealthiest former first couple ever. But don't forget, Hillary had to walk back saying we were broke. So it's not all going smooth in book tour land for the prospective presidential candidate. Joining us now, though, ladies and gentlemen, where I'm sure it is all going smooth over at the Daily Beast, we welcome in Joel Kotkin, presidential fellow. I keep messing that up, Joel. A presidential fellow at Chapman University and columnist at the Daily Beast, and author of The New Class Conflict. Hello, Joel. How are you, sir?
All right. How are you?
Good. Good to talk to you. Now, I guess we should watch what we say. You know, it's sad. It's sad. In your piece, Watch What You Say, the new liberal power elite won't tolerate dissent, and that's a great piece that you wrote at the Daily Beast. You know, I tell my son who's 14, because he's politically oriented, he has opinions, they're conservative in nature, and I always say to him, you're not saying anything wrong, but you've got to watch what you say. And I hate that I have to tell him that because he's not saying anything wrong. But in today's climate, a kid, an adult, anyone could get ruined for the rest of their life by saying something that the left doesn't like.
Well, I think the most important thing is to understand it in an institutional point of view. Universities, for instance. When you look at universities, they've always tended to be, kind of liberal. But there was dissent. I went to Berkeley myself, in the 70s, and there were many very highly regarded conservative and middle-of-the-road professors. That's becoming rarer and rarer and rarer. And so what happens is if you will, this class of people and their point of view reproduce themselves. That's why how many conservatives work for major newspapers and television shows? How many conservatives or even somewhat skeptical moderates work in Hollywood? I mean, where I live. I mean, you just don't have the kind of diversity of opinion. And then what you have is you have an echo chamber. Everybody, it's like global warming, climate change. I mean, and I think there's legitimate things that you could talk about there, but you can't even suggest that. Well, maybe trying to wipe out suburbia is maybe not the best way of dealing with this. If you don't take the party line down the road, like I don't consider myself a conservative. A lot of my views are way to the left. But my friends who are conservatives will say, well, I disagree with you on that, but I like what you said about this, and so we'll talk about it. On the left, you can't go off the reservation at all. So if you're, let's say, a student or you're trying to work in Hollywood, and you say, "Hey, I'm a conservative," boy, you're kind of set, really making yourself almost unemployable.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I'm so afraid of. And with my son, and look at the people who have lost their jobs. Look at the Mozilla, and look at it goes on and on and on. I mean, when Imus said, going all the way back to when Imus said about the Rutgers students, which was a horrible thing to say. I mean, he had to go make a pilgrimage to Al Sharpton. And Joel, the irony is, Al Sharpton has said racist things, horrific things, and he sits in judgment of what's acceptable when it comes to free speech. Now, you make a very interesting. You talk about progressive clerisy accepting no dissent, and you talk about pre-revolutionary France. I mean, if you want to talk about progressives, look at this country. This is nothing exactly new. I mean, American people don't know the history of this country. Certainly children don't. And if you go back to President Wilson and what he did, he locked up more people than Mussolini. In a short amount of time, and the free speech. This predates McCarthy, which you referred to in your column, by decades. But this isn't brand new to this country.
No, I mean, look, there's a unfortunate streak in the American character, probably in part inherited from the Puritans, which is very, very judgmental and not particularly tolerant, and it has always been balanced by other forces. But what we see in America, and this is what the clerisy that I write about in the book is, there are now huge and powerful institutions where essentially only one point of view is accepted. Universities are generally that way. Most of the media is that way. And as I said in the piece, when Rupert Murdoch, he's not going to last forever. When he passes, I'll bet you there's a very good chance that the Wall Street Journal will look just like the New York Times. I mean, it will be, or the Financial Times. It will have the same kind of politics.
Well, you're onto something, and it's very sad. And you talk about the things that need to be talked about. You talk about federal workers. You talk about public sector. You talk about the unions. You talk about speech codes. And my question to you, though, is how do we reverse this now? Is it too late? I mean, and what's it going to take? You just painted a dire picture on, God forbid, the eventual passing of who you just said, will eventually one day pass and what it might mean for publications. But can you envision us going backwards to more freedom of expression, more acceptance of diverse ideas?
Well, things do go in cycles. And, the Internet, which in some ways can create a kind of unanimity, can also allow for greater diversity, and I think a lot of young people being confronted with almost impossibly rigid form of left-wing thinking, if you want to put it that way, I find it with my students, they have some skepticism left. The problem is, are the institutions so far gone that they cannot be reformed or changed from within? And then, of course, the alternative is alternative institutions. People, send their kids to colleges where, and I'll add Chapman to this, where there is a diversity of viewpoint, and where we have very liberal people and pretty conservative people much more conservative than me, and people much more liberal than me, and I think that's the way it should be. And I was talking to somebody in Washington. I mean, there's a tremendous difference between Eugene Genovese, the greatest historian of slavery, who was a Marxist but a great scholar, and let's say someone like Howard Zinn, who was really an agitprop kind of intellectual, whose goal it is really to propagate a certain point of view as opposed to real scholarship. And we're sort of losing that. There are so many columnists in America today, conservative and liberal. I don't even read them because I know what they're going to say, and I'm not going to learn anything. Then there are conservative columnists, great ones like Mike Barone, and some liberals like Harold Meyerson, who, when they write something, they're not just name calling. So I mean, there's still within the country the diversity of opinion. But what happens is, as we get more homogeneity, both the right and the left become more strident and more predictable.
Well, the Pew Research poll that's out today showing that we're more polarized than ever on left and right, and people tend to congregate and make friends with those who are politically like-minded, etc. It all fits in. And the great book is The New Class Conflict by Joel Kotkin, presidential fellow at Chapman University and a columnist at the Daily Beast. Joel, great to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, look, do we not document this every single day? I disagree with him that intolerance stems from the Puritan ethic. That's a whole other discussion, but I just want to go on record as saying I disagree there. All right, we're coming back, Mary and I, with the panel. Don't miss it.